Hi guys, my name is Christy Casipio of Cakes by Christy, and today I'm going to show you a technique that I like to call the sprinkle ripple. These are the supplies that you're going to need. For this specific technique, I highly recommend using a fondant covered cake. You can do this technique in buttercream, but it is not recommended because it's really messy. So I've got my cake here, it's all covered and stacked, and now I'm going to go ahead and mark out with my Dresden tool where I'm going to put my sprinkle ripple. So because it's Christmas, I decided to do a Christmas tree, which is exciting because I've never done this in green or brown, so I'm excited to try something new. So the most important part about marking your cake, it doesn't matter how deep you mark into your cake because you're going to cover those marks up with your sprinkle ripple, but the only thing you want to keep in mind is that wherever you mark it, you're going to have to put a sprinkle ripple over that mark. So you want your lines to be a little bit inside where you're going to actually put your sprinkle ripple. Now normally whenever I mark my cake, I almost always use my Dresden tool, but because I'm doing a Christmas tree and I kind of wanted to maintain those straight lines, I'm just using a flexible poly blade. It's not necessary, it was just a little easier than drawing my Dresden tool in a straight line. Now, if you are doing a tiered cake like I am, you do want to make sure that your cake is completely stacked. You don't want to be stacking these tiers with your sprinkle ripples on them once you've already put your sprinkles on, because you're going to risk more sprinkles falling off. In addition to sprinkles falling off, your cake tiers might not line up the way that you want them to. So again, it is very important that it is a fondant covered cake and that it is completely stacked and marked out. So now that we have our cake marked out, we're going to go ahead and take piping gel. It's very important that it's piping gel, and we're going to paint inside those lines with a very thin coating of piping gel. Now because I'm working on a smaller cake and there's not a lot of surface area to cover, I can actually do both tiers in the piping gel right now. But if I was going to do a cake that had a little bit more surface area that sprinkle ripple was going to be on, I would probably do it tier by tier or small section by small section because your piping gel will dry out. Now I have tried a few other edible glues like Tylose glue, but that kind of glue does not work. You want something that's going to be really sticky but also not melt your cake, so that piping gel is really important. So now that our cake is all marked out, we can start on the sprinkle ripples themselves. So the trunk of my tree is going to be brown, so I've got some brown sanding sugar, I've got 2 different colors of brown fondant, and I've also got a brown luster dust. You do want to make sure that you have a lot of sprinkle and dust varieties for this so that your sprinkle ripples don't look the same. So all I'm doing right now is I'm rolling out a tapered log. Once you have your tapered log rolled out to the length you want, you can cut it as is, and then you're going to go ahead and flatten it. Now the reason that I'm cutting it flat is because it's going to be sitting against the cake board, and so I do need a flat edge. And then the reason we're going to flatten our fondant log is because we don't want it coming off the cake that much, and already a log of fondant with added sprinkles on it is going to be popping off the cake. So I'm going to take my piping gel. I'm going to go ahead and cover that log completely in that piping gel. Now again, it's important you're using piping gel and not Tylose glue. Tylose glue will actually melt your sprinkles and it won't work. So piping gel is very important for this step. Now once our flattened and tapered logs are covered in piping gel, we're going to go ahead and dip them into our sprinkles and really move it around in there to make sure that you get complete coverage. And you'll note it is very sticky, it's just sticking to my fingers naturally. And we're just going to go ahead and place it exactly where we want it to go and give it a little bit of a curve. You certainly don't have to give it a curve if you don't want to, but I do feel like it looks a little bit more natural when it's nice and curvy and flowy rather than just straight up and down. So now I'm going to use a different color brown, and because this piece isn't going to be sitting directly on the board, I'm going to roll a very short and thick tapered log. So it doesn't need any flat pieces anywhere. So it's going to be right in the middle of the trunk. So now that we've done a few with sprinkles, we're going to go ahead and do a few with the luster dust. Now you can do it as a dry dust like I'm doing here, or you can use alcohol or lemon extract to do a wet dust. It really doesn't matter. It will be a little bit cleaner with just your dry dust. Two of the items on the supply list are a wet towel and a dry towel, and those are really necessary for this project because it's a very sticky project. You're constantly using piping gel, you're using dry or wet luster dust, so it's really important that you always are able to keep your hands clean and dried off so that you're not transferring the wrong color sprinkle to a log, you're not getting it on your cake. So you do want to make sure you have the necessary supplies right next to you at all times. Right about now, if you're thinking that this is a very labor-intensive and sticky process, you are right, but the results in the end are worth it. So when you're placing your sprinkle ripples onto your cake, just make sure that you don't place multiple of the same colors or sprinkle type next to each other. And also make sure you leave little spaces, like triangle or tapered log shaped spaces, so that you can always fit new ones in. It is easier for this specific technique to work from one side to the other, or work from the middle and then out to the sides, because you don't want to have to be fitting in a bunch of small pieces like puzzle pieces. So you just want to be able to sit them next to each other and put more next to them. It's a little bit less work than trying to fit them together, again, like a puzzle piece. So now I'm just going to go in with my X-Acto blade and trim off my brown sprinkle ripple. It's going a little bit too far up the cake. I'm going to be putting green sprinkle ripples there, so just going to cut off the top and make sure that all of these are in the right spot. Now that we've done our brown tree trunk, it's time to move on to our green sprinkle ripple. So I've got a few different color green fondants that are very similarly colored to my sprinkles. And of course I have my piping gel, and I do have a few dry luster dusts that are green as well. So this is exactly the same as when we're doing the trunk, except we're going to be doing it in green, and we have a little bit more of a variety of sprinkles. Now when it comes to the specific type of sprinkles that you want to use for this technique, I would really recommend sanding sugar and crystal sugar. Non-Perriells work really great. Sometimes jimmies work well, but oftentimes they fall off. So if you're going to use jimmies or non-Perriells, you do have to make sure that your fondant is similarly colored to the sprinkles so that when some fall off, it's not as noticeable. Now another thing that I want to point out is that my trunk has some very small ripples, and I'm starting to make my ripples on my actual cake a little bit bigger. Now you can do your ripples really whatever size or shape or length you want, but you do want to keep in mind that the smaller your ripples are, if you have to do a lot of them, that's more work for you. So this is a very labor-intensive design, but if your ripples are a little bit bigger rather than smaller, it's going to take you less time. Now, another important detail is that when you are putting your ripples at the top edge of your cake, you do want to make sure that the cut edge also has your piping gel on it. So when you look down on your cake, you want to be able to see the top edge has those sprinkles. You don't want to just see a fondant log. You don't want to see what's underneath. You only want to see shimmery, gorgeous sprinkles. So you'll notice that for this specific design, I decided to work from the inside out towards both edges. That was just a design preference. I think it would look a little bit strange had I started on a diagonal on the side rather than right in the center and worked from the side. If the whole tier was going to be covered, it would not have mattered where I started. And just for your reference, this is a 4-inch and a 6-inch cake. Now for these cakes, it doesn't matter if you work from the top down or the bottom up. As long as you mark out your cake, you'll still get them all in the right spots that you want them to be. But you will notice that when you start putting them on your top tiers, that the sprinkles do fall off a lot more, or at least you're going to be noticing it more. So you do see me brushing off sprinkles constantly off that top tier. Again, this is the reason why I highly, highly recommend that this cake technique be done in fondant and not in buttercream, just because wiping all those off the top of a buttercream cake just gives me anxiety. Now it's time to decorate the tree, and for this I'm going to use red sixlets. I'm attaching the sixlets to the cake using royal icing, because I did want them to stick and I don't want them to fall off. Now because our sprinkle ripples are nice and malleable still, it's easier to stick our sixlets in. So if you're going to be working on a cake like this for a few days, or you're working on a display cake and it's going to need something like these sixlets on top, you want to do that before your fondant dries. And of course, I also made a fondant gold star. I'm just going to pop that on the top, again with royal icing. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I can't wait to see what you create. But what does it look like in other colors? Let me show you. I've done this in black and gold. I've done it in white and ivory. And most recently I did it in red and gold. Thanks so much for watching, guys.